Terraria. Always the bridesmaid, never the flower girl. The game that, in an alternate universe, would have been the most popular thing in all 2010s.
Welcome to Dark Souls, bitch!
For those of you all not too familiar with it, it's essentially 2D Minecraft, except written by J.R.R. Tolkien. There are unicorns, fairies, and the Eater of Souls, a creature so grotesque it hasn't stopped giving me nightmares ever since. I fucking hate this thing. And that's the main theme of this game. Slightly terrifying monsters that appear out of nowhere and will stop at nothing to make you explode into a fountain of guts, blood, and gold. Terraria wants to surprise/scare you with every opportunity it allows itself, and it doesn't hold back. What separates this game from its blocky counterpart are the myriad of bosses that show up when you least expect it. There's absolutely no warning to when these guys will appear. Walking through a forest, King Slime appears. Exploring a mysterious dungeon, a skeleton rips you limb from limb. Trying to sleep, you feel like you're being watched, and it's not by Santa. There's a ton of bosses in this game, but what I want to know is, which one's the scariest? Which monster is going to be spending the most time invading my nightmares? Let's find out. We begin with the least intimidating of the bunch, the Easter Bunny. Unless you have a crippling fear of rabbits, there's really not much to be frightened of. Its only real horrific trait is the fact that it has one of the largest health pools in the entire game, meaning that fighting this oddly intrusive looking bunny is a real slog to get through. I'm sure Jesus didn't die for this thing. Save the bees. Sure, this one might impale you with its stinger and set a flurry of buzzy insects after you, but these guys are endangered. Do you really want to be known as the bee killer? How could you be afraid of this fuzzy creature? Bees are like the only insect I'd ever considered to be on the cute spectrum. They're saving the world all by themselves despite our best efforts. We should just leave them alone for now. This is just noble jelly. The only scary thing about this guy is the fact that he can spawn on day one and completely ruin every hope you had of not dying immediately. This blobby boy likes to jump about, squishing anything it happens to land on, and it looked like some poor unfortunate soul happened to get caught in its splash zone. In its wiki, this boss is actually made up of smaller slimes that join together to form its own monsters union. Socialism starts with slime. Maybe looking at this guy and thinking, how is he a boss? He's just a funny looking plague doctor. And then he starts zipping across the map and duplicating himself, and you realise you're way out of your depth here. Like most bosses in this game, fighting this guy for the first time will completely overwhelm you, especially considering he can clone himself up to 6 times. This fever dream of a fight takes a lot of pre-planning and focus, something that's never been my strong suit. I have about as much foresight as your aunt who's really into tarot cards, which coincidentally draws a lot of similarities to this guy. Being the leader of the Easter Island Heads, considering he's the only one to actually have a body, Golem resides in an underground jungle cave. While not inherently scary per se, he definitely gives off some creepy vibes. His desolate stare as he attempts to crush you into the ground makes it feel like it's just another day in the office for him. He feels so detached from all the murdering he's been doing, which, you know, could never be me. Fortunately, his stare doesn't last very long as his head detaches from his body, revealing a robotic yellow screen. Is that better? Okay, how do I even begin to describe what this thing is? Juke Fish Run is a third shark, a third pig, and a third dragon that enjoys blowing bubbles. Very scary, I hear you thinking. Trust me, it gets slightly more scary. He's still quite low on the list. And while he does look very cartoony, the main horror in this game comes from shitting your pants in realization that you've severely underprepared for this fight, and you're going to be doing this over and over and over again until you finally kill him. And once you do a decent chunk of damage, he goes full anime mode on you, as shown by the fact that his eyes start to glow. And as the final nail in the coffin, one of his moves is called the Cthulhu Nado, and it makes you wet. Interesting game design there. Am I the only person feeling a bit uncomfortable facing this boss? Fighting this thing just feels gross. I can't put my finger on it, but it's just very off-putting. I do not like how grabby its tendrils are, and how deliberate it moves towards you. Get that fucking mouth away from me. Lanteria shoots thorn balls and seeds, lovely, and is relentless in its quest to kill you. I thought plants were supposed to be the one things keeping us alive on this earth, other than bees, which also happen to have an agenda against you in this game. Anyway, this squeamish boss fight has put me off gardening ever since. I can't even look at these things anymore. Giant four-armed robot skeleton. This guy is an upgraded version of Skeletron, an earlier boss in the game that we'll get to in a little bit. What I imagine is that Skeletron, after being defeated by you, pulled a Batman and bought a bunch of fancy gadgets to try and take its revenge back on you. What ranks the Amazon Prime version of this guy lower than his bony alter ego is the fact that you're just a lot more prepared to face him. The first time you encounter the OG Skeletron is when you stumble upon a big temple and you go exploring down into the caves with your eyes full of wonder and awe, and all of a sudden a giant hand swipes at you, grabs you, and kills you instantly, leaving you just scared and confused. There is no better / terrifying introduction to a boss in this game, and it's something that the rest of these guys just can't compete with. And now we have our first example of Terraria's love for giant body parts and organs. The brain of Cthulhu is an early game boss, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying to look at. It's a floating brain that teleports and has tentacles and can't be hurt for half the battle. It summons creepers that are somehow the 7th iteration of flying eyeball monsters in this game, which defend the big brain from getting damaged. You'll have to kill them all to even get close to defeating the horrific hippocampus. And just when you think you're close to defeating it, it rips a hole in its body to reveal a beating heart with an eye in the center. The real challenge of this boss fight is not pausing the game there and then to just have a big long lie down in your bed. Cthulhu just seems to keep misplacing his bits, doesn't he? The Eye of Cthulhu is the first non-optional boss in this game, and it shows up at night unannounced most times. Look at this thing, it's a giant bloody eye that watches you. Back to the boss fight, once you get it down to about half health, it sheds its pupil to reveal a hungry set of teeth. Why do all of Cthulhu's organs have their own set of organs? Did they gain enough sentience to try and start their own lives of their own? Terrorizing poor innocent me? The Destroyer is a very long, wormy robot that roams underground. I don't know who made this thing, but I can't imagine they stuck around for very long after they booted up the Wormatron for the first time. This boss also has an army of minions called probes that blast lasers at you. Now, I don't need to be told twice, but if something called a probe is locking on and chasing you down, it's never a good sign. And the fact it comes from a metal worm doesn't make it any better. In fact, it just makes it worse. Oh fuck, this is so much worse. Now that there's no metallic armor covering up its fleshy bits, I have to actually look at this thing now, and it's not a pretty sight. Spawning in the corruption biome, a name that fits it just so well, the Eater of Worlds is a naked counterpart to the Destroyer, and I hate it even more. At least with the Destroyer, I could secretly pretend it wasn't a giant worm. But with this guy, I have no choice but to accept the fact that it is. Every time this guy springs out of the ground, trying to bite your head off with all 8 of its eyes staring you down, it just sends a really horrible chill down my spine. I'm not emotionally mature enough to deal with this thing. Terraria's love for flying eyeball monsters continues as the Eye of Cthulhu gains 2020 vision. As if this year couldn't get any worse. The twins, named Retinazer and Spasmatism, cute names, have been conjoined at birth, and it's your job to help separate them. Although they're not very cooperative, as once you're close to cutting their tendril, one grows teeth and the other turns into a laser, and they both try even harder to kill you. I don't even know how Cthulhu's getting on. He's not only lost his brain, but now both his eyes as well. Is he just waiting for the day his nose upsticks and leaves for a better life of its own? And we're on to Skeletron, the scariest and most mysterious early game boss. Like I said before, it is really great world building through exploratory gameplay, which is brilliant for making it such an ominous boss to eventually face. And when that fight does come, you still feel vastly underprepared for it, no matter how much foreshadowing was done beforehand. Battling Skeletron is a trial and error encounter that will take a hell of a while to do. Like, why didn't anyone tell me his head spins like that? And finally, once you defeat him, you can progress onto the last pre-hard mode boss. The Wall of Flesh. This fucking thing is absolutely horrific. The Wall of Flesh is the last boss you face before you can enter hard mode, acting as a gatekeeper to your progression, like what those sad little men on Twitter who comment under women's football games think they're doing. Fuck them. To summon this giant grotesque creature from hell, the Wall of Flesh I mean, you have to sacrifice your guide, your first ever friend in this game, who's been with you through thick and thin, and who will always offer some helpful advice. Okay, what's next? Once you kill the guide, by hand or by proxy, the wall of flesh will spawn. Looking like a ghoulish flounder, this monster strafes left to right, decimating everything in its way. Mainly you. Upon defeating the guardian of the world, you allow your game to slowly become corrupted or crimsoned. Almost like the wall of flesh was preventing that. Maybe this thing was secretly the good guy, trying to prevent you from accidentally destroying your own world. Whoops. Wait a minute, we're not done yet. It says here that impending doom is approaching. Ah, fuck. Yeah, this guy is a half-man apocalypse that's ready to destroy the world just because he wants to. The eye obsession in this game continues, with this boss having 7, and also another horde of flying eyeball minions. But this cliche doesn't make him any less frightening. He's fucking huge, taking up half the entire screen, and following you around no matter what. There's no way to escape this thing. You've dug your own grave. And when you eventually deal a decent amount of damage to this guy, the retinas on his hands fly off and turn to giant mouths, which is somehow another cliche this game has regarding eyeballs. It's a tough fight, but once you win, you're able to revel in the fact that you've beaten the game, as he's the last boss. You've done it, well done, the world's been saved from you. You did summon half these monsters voluntarily. And that's that for this video. I hope you enjoyed me slightly lose my mind as I talked about how scary 2D pixel art was. Stay tuned next week when I talk about something else. I don't know what yet.